So for Chapter 3, this was the section, and you might want to write these down, where you had, for instance, those would be alternate exterior angles. And alternate exterior angles are congruent to each other, correct? Then, try and color code this for you. We had alternate interior angles. And alternate interior angles are also congruent to each other. And then we had corresponding. I'm going to run out of room here. Corresponding angles. And corresponding angles are congruent to each other. Correct? And the last one that we have are consecutive interior angles, and those are supplementary. Sorry, I ran out of room there. So you might want to make sure you have that down. And I would also make sure I have down whether they're congruent or supplementary. Because this whole chapter was kind of identifying what they were and then deciding, do you set them equal to each other? Or do you add them together to equal 180 degrees? So the first few questions just asked you to name each angle pair. 3 and 10. Oh, I didn't even mean to do it. It's the same color over here. Those are consecutive interior angles. Okay. 9 and 13. Those are corresponding. Now, again, the relationship about them being congruent or supplementary only applies if the lines are parallel. So, if I tell you, given that P is parallel to Q, and the measure of angle 3 is 75 degrees, find the measure of angle 5. Well, if the lines are parallel, those are alternate interior angles, correct? And so if the lines are parallel, those angles are congruent. So if the measure of angle 3 is 75 degrees, the measure of angle 5 is also 75 degrees. Okay? Now, if P is parallel to Q, and the measure of angle 10 is 3x minus 7, and the measure of angle 13 is 4x minus 9. So if these lines are parallel, I can tell that those are consecutive interior angles, and consecutive interior angles add up to 180 degrees. So in this case, I'm writing 3x minus 7 plus 4x minus 9 equals 180. 3x plus 4x is 7x. Negative 7 minus 9 is negative 16. I add 16 to both sides. That's 196. And when I divide, x equals 28. So again, I need to know how to identify the vocabulary word, alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding or consecutive interior, and then if those lines are parallel, know which of those angle relationships will make the angles congruent and which one will make them supplementary. Now, the next question asks about given angle 1 and angle 5. If I tell you that 1 and 5 are congruent, then what lines are parallel? So the two lines they sit on are P and Q, and their corresponding angles. So even if the wording having that converse in there threw you, you should be able to pick out corresponding angles. The reason it's the converse is the original theorem says, okay, if these lines are parallel, then blah, blah, blah. The converse says if blah, 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 then the lines are parallel. It's just changing the order. Number 26 is also a bit confusing because they're asking you to prove that P and Q are parallel. And the first set of angles that they give you, 3 and 10, are actually consecutive interior angles. And they say, by the consecutive interior angles theorem, which angle pair must be supplementary. Okay? The reason it's not 3 and 10 is they start with if P is parallel to Q. 3 and 10 don't sit on P and Q. They both sit on P. Okay? So that's why the correct answer here is B, which is 3 and 8, because 3 and 8 sit on line P and line Q. So if you messed up 26, that was the one I did have a number of students mess up. Be careful, that's why. And for number 27, measure of angle 4 and measure of angle 8. So when I look, 4 and 8 are corresponding. If they're equal, then the lines are parallel. So I need to say 7x minus 20 equals 5x plus 18. And if you don't have your review and you're doing this at home, that's the question down there. The angle 4 is 7x minus 20, and the measure of angle 8 is 5x plus 18. And I see that they're corresponding. I'm taking those and I'm setting them equal to each other. I'm subtracting 5x from both sides. So that's 2x. I add this 20. 2x equals 38. X equals 19. Again, as Mr. Parks tells me, make sure I'm answering the question. And the question says, find the value of x. So the answer is 19. Number 28. Write an equation in point-slope form. So if you don't remember point-slope form, y minus y1 equals slope x minus x1. Y minus 7. The slope is a half. X minus negative 4 is x plus 4. That's answer A. Number 29. I need a line with an x-intercept of 2 and a y-intercept of 12. I will admit this one is probably the most unlike anything we did in class. I think every other question was either on a review or a test. So, but a y-intercept means in slope-intercept form, this would have a y-intercept of 12, right? This has a y-intercept of 12. This has a y-intercept of 12. J has a y-intercept of 2. Can't be J. To find your x-intercept, your y-intercept is where x is 0. So your x-intercept is where y is 0. That means you need to do some guess and check. So I'm going to substitute in 0 for y. And I'm going to solve for x. And when I do this, I get that x is equal to 2. My answer is F. To give you an example of how I would know if it, because I just got lucky, the first one is the correct one there, let's look at G. If I plugged 0 in for y, and I subtracted 12 from both sides, if negative 12 equals 2x, x equals negative 6. So the x-intercept here, when y is 0, x is negative 6. That's not the correct answer because they're telling me they want the one where the x-intercept is 2. Does that one make sense? Okay, so let's go through. This one is confusing. What is y-intercept? What does this mean? This means that if I graph it, it's going to go through the y-axis at 0, 12, correct? And it's going to go through the x-axis at 2, 0. Okay? So, since they gave these to me in slope-intercept form, that's y equals mx plus b, what's my y-intercept on this equation? Plus 12, right? So it could be that. What's my y-intercept here? Plus 12. It could be that. What's my y-intercept for h? Plus 12. Could be that. For the equation for j, y equals 12x plus 2, my y-intercept in this equation would be 2. But they've told me they want the y-intercept to be what? 12. So it can't be that. Now I have to find the x-intercept. The way that you find the x-intercept is you plug 0 in for y. Because my x-intercept is supposed to be 2, 0, correct? So now, unfortunately, it's just check each one. Okay? So that's what I did. I put for the first one 0 in for y, negative 6x plus 12. I need to get x by itself. So I subtract 12 from both sides. And when I divide both sides by negative 6, negative 12 divided by negative 6 is a positive 2. Okay? Really, that's the best way to do this problem. Sometimes with problems, you do the math and then you find which answer works. This one, I would use that strategy of guess and check. Pick something and try it. And I just start with the first one. I just got lucky that I didn't have to do the other two. You know, sometimes you do every one and then it's the last one that works and it's like you're annoyed. Okay? So that's really the best way to do this. Okay? But if you're struggling with that one, then you probably want to write on your note taker, when finding the x-intercept, plug 0 in for y and solve for x. This is the exact thing my algebra kids are struggling with right now. Okay? So for problem 30, there's steps here. First, you have to figure out the slope. So if you need to write down the steps, that's what you're doing. You're going to figure out the slope. Then you're going to put the equation in point slope form. You just pick one point. So choose one point and write the equation in point slope form. And then you're going to move it to slope-intercept. Okay? So how do I figure out the slope? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to do -3 minus 15 over 1 minus 7. -3 minus 15 is -18. And 1 minus 7 is -6. Okay? And so, sorry, -18 divided by -6, that should have been +3, not -3. So that's the slope. Now I have to put it into point slope form because I don't know the y-intercept yet. So I'm going to use the first point. Y plus 3 equals a slope of 3, x minus 1. Y minus y1. But y1 is -3. So y minus -3 is y plus 3. Now I need to move it into slope-intercept form. If you're not going to remember how to do that, first you need to distribute y plus 3 equals 3x minus 3. Then you need to do what? Okay? Then get y by itself. So you subtract 3. And you get -6. Okay? So if you need more steps, you write them down. Are there any questions on this one?
Nope.
Good? Okay. I'm going to stop the video.
All right.